right. Hi guys, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's ready to make some mac and cheese today. All right, so let's go over our ingredients and our equipment to start with, okay? So I have 1 pound bacon, okay? We're going to bake up, and so it gets crispy. We're going to chop it into bits, all right, to add to our mac and cheese. Of course, we have some cheese. I have some sharp cheddar and some smoked Gouda. I'm also going to add a little bit of pepper jack cheese just because I like to add a little bit of spice to my macaroni and cheese. That is optional, of course. I have some panko breadcrumbs for my topping. Heavy whipping cream, which is our base. Salt and pepper to taste. Some noodles. You can use either elbow macaroni. I'm using the rotini, which are the spiral ones. I think they catch more of the cheese sauce. Some olive oil to put in our pot with our boiling water for our noodles. And some all-purpose flour. For our equipment, we're going to need a pot to boil our water in. You can kind of see it in the background there, okay? Because I'm already getting that started. I'm going to get my water boiling. I'm going to add my salt and my olive oil here in a moment. I'm also going to have another pot, okay, for my cheese sauce. I have a bowl, which I'm going to use to store my cheddar cheese and my Gouda, any of my cheese that I'm shredding up. Okay, I have 1 dry measuring spoon, okay? 1 tablespoon measuring spoon, sorry. Dry measuring cups. A cheese grater. My cutting mat that I'm going to use to catch my cheese that I grate. And a baking dish to put my macaroni and cheese in. Okay, so I'm going to let you go ahead and gather those items. Oh, I also need a pan to put my bacon on, right? So I'm going to lay my bacon out on here, and I'm going to put it in the oven at 375, 380 degrees. And I'm just going to keep checking it periodically until it gets to about the crispness that I want. All right? So go ahead and gather those things, and we'll be right back to get started. All right, so I have my pot of water here. All right, got it filled with water. You don't want to overfill it because when the noodles boil, you don't want it to boil over. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my stove up to high. You do want it to boil vigorously, okay? And you're not going to turn it down once it starts boiling that way. A lot of people make that mistake. They'll start their water boiling. Once it starts boiling really hard, they'll turn it down. You actually want to keep it boiling vigorously, okay? And then add your noodles, okay? So I'm going to add some salt and some olive oil to this. So just a little bit of salt here. A little shake. Okay, adds flavor to the noodles. And some olive oil to keep them from sticking, okay? So I'm going to add some salt and olive oil. Then when the noodles go down through, they'll get coated with the olive oil. It helps to keep them from sticking all together, okay? I have that turned up high. I've got that started, okay? So go ahead and get that started, and we'll be right back. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add my bacon to my baking sheet. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to take it strip by strip, right? And I'm going to lay it out on my sheet so that it bakes kind of flat, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and lay this out. You're going to bake your whole entire package of bacon. Okay, so you're going to bake the whole thing. If you want to, for a decorative top, you can leave like 3 pieces partially baked, but not all the way. And sometimes I like to lay them across the top of my macaroni and cheese just to add a little bit of decoration to it, okay? So I'm going to spread these all out. It's going to probably take me more than one time on my baking sheet to bake all of my bacon, right? To cook it all. And that's okay. I'm just going to lay that all out, and then I'm going to put it in the oven at 375. And you just got to kind of keep an eye on it until it gets crisp enough where you can chop it up into bits. All right, so here's my first one. Okay, I'm not going to layer it on top of each other. You want it to bake thoroughly. So I'm just going to do one single layer at a time. I'm going to place this in my oven, and you go ahead and do the same. We'll be right back. Now it's going to be time to grate our cheese. So I'm going to grate the whole thing of my cheddar, okay? And then because I'm using Gouda and my pepper jack, I'm actually going to grate half of each. So I'm going to have about 2 cups of cheese. Each one of these are 8 ounces, okay? 8 ounces equals 1 cup. So I'm going to do all of my cheddar. I'm going to do half of my pepper jack. And I'm also going to do half of the smoked Gouda, okay? So that'll add a nice flavor. And it melts nice and creamy, so it adds a nice texture. All of these cheeses are good cheeses to use in macaroni and cheese, okay? If you're not going to use pepper jack, which I know that wasn't on the ingredients list, this is just a personal preference, you can go ahead and grate all of your smoked Gouda, okay? So in order to grate it, I'm going to use my cheese grater, okay? I'm going to use the large side of my cheese grater, okay? And what I'm going to do, I like to use the corners, so if I'm using the Gouda, right, I'm just going to rub it up and down my cheese grater so that it grates up all of my cheese, okay? So I'll do this until I get to the end of it. Be careful, okay, not to hit your knuckles or your fingers on the cheese grater because it will cut you, okay, and it hurts, it's painful, it's not a good thing to get cut with. I suppose no things are good to get cut with, but for some reason, because they're not super sharp, they actually hurt a little bit worse, okay? So, I'm gonna grate all of that up, okay? All the way until I get down, and the last little sliver, you can, okay, so that you don't get your knuckles or your fingers too close to the cheese grater. You don't actually have to get every last little bit of it. Just want to get down as close to the end of it as you can, okay? Grate that. Okay, and that'll be my Gouda. Once you've gotten to the point where you've pretty much gotten all the way down to the end, okay, and I want to use up the rest of this, okay, so I have a little bit left over, not very much, right? I'm just going to kind of crumble this up. You can do it with your fingers, kind of place it down with the other cheese, and it will melt, okay? So I'm going to give my cheese grater a little tap. So there I have some of my Gouda. Okay, I'm going to add that to my bowl. And I'm going to do the same thing with my other 2 cheeses, okay? So we're going to go ahead and grate all of our cheese up. You can add it all to the same bowl, okay? So go ahead and do that. That'll get us ready to move over to our cooking area. And then we'll be right back to do that. I have my grated up cheese, right? That's all grated. Okay, so I have that all shredded up and in one bowl. Okay, I have it all together there. I also want to show you about the same amount of time that it took to shred up my cheese is about how long I want my bacon to cook. So now my bacon has cooked. It's cooked all the way through. Okay, it's going to turn out crispy. Okay. So I'll be able to break that into pieces or chop it into pieces with my chef's knife. I am going to go ahead and move that to a paper plate or a plate with a paper towel on it, okay? Something that will absorb some of the grease, okay? And that'll help it crisp up a little bit better. So I'm going to transfer that over, and then after it sits there for a while and cools and crisps, I will take and chop that all up, okay? Do not get rid of your bacon grease because we're going to use about 2 tablespoons of that to add to our sauce, just to give it a little extra flavor, okay? So the bacon grease that's left over in your pan, don't get rid of that, all right? All right, we're gonna get ready to move over to the stovetop, so we'll be right back. You can see that my noodles have also gotten done, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna strain those. I'm gonna let those strain out. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my baking pan, okay, so I have my baking pan here, and I'm just going to coat it with a little bit of cooking spray, okay? So I'm going to kind of hold this back, just to kind of help prevent it from sticking, okay? So I've coated my baking pan, strained my noodles. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add those to my baking pan so they can sit in there. It's not a problem. Okay, and then that kind of just frees up some room for me on my stovetop. Move this off to the side. All right, once my bacon has sat there and kind of drained a little bit, I'm just going to take it all. Okay, so I'm going to take my bacon over here. I'm going to stack it all up kind of together like that. I'm just going to take my chef's knife. And I'm just going to chop it all up. Okay, so you have your bacon pieces, okay? So you want to chop them up so that they can be added into your roux, okay? So you'll want to go ahead and do that. All right, I've chopped up my bacon. So I add 1 stick to my pot, okay? I'm going to put that on my stovetop, let it melt. Okay, so I'm going to turn my stove on about low, medium low, okay? Let your butter melt. Once that butter melts, we're going to go ahead and add our 4 tablespoons of flour, okay? You can see my butter has completely melted, okay? So I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of flour. There you go. Be kind of heaping tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, and 1 that's a little bit smaller. Okay. So about 4 tablespoons. I'm going to take it, I'm going to whisk that into my butter. That's going to form my roux. Okay. So it's going to get kind of thick and pasty. And you can see, you know when it's formed a roux, you can see the lines as I move my whisk around. See how it makes a line and it kind of stays there for a minute? That's how you've gotten your roux, okay? So I have my roux. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my heavy whipping cream, okay? I'm going to add my whole quart of heavy whipping cream. Okay, you don't want to let your roux sit there with the butter too long because you don't want it to melt. So I'm going to go ahead and add my heavy whipping cream, and then I'm going to whisk that all together. Okay, let's whisk this together. Get that stirred together well. Notice how I'm hitting the bottom of my pan. You can hear that sound because I'm scraping the bottom of my pan. I don't want anything to burn to the bottom of my pan. Okay, that's why I am rubbing the whisk on the bottom. All right, so I've got that mixed together really well. Okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to let this heat up until it just bubbles, okay? So the first signs, when it first starts bubbling, is when I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my cheese a little bit at a time, okay? So we're gonna wait for that to bubble up, and then we'll be right back to add our cheese. So my heavy cream and butter and roux, okay, my concoction has bubbled, okay? So I'm going to add in my 2 tablespoons of bacon grease just for flavor, okay? Add a little flavor to it. So I'm gonna whisk this in, get that mixed around in there really well. Okay, and then I'm gonna start to slowly add my cheeses, okay? So I'm gonna keep whisking this really well, making sure I hit the bottom of my pan so that it doesn't burn, okay? And then I'm gonna add my cheese a little bit at a time as I whisk, okay? So I'm gonna add a little bit of cheese. I'm gonna whisk that in there. Okay, so mix a little bit in, mix it until it's creamy again, and it's all melted. And then you'll add a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until you get it all mixed in there. Okay. I'm going to keep whisking that until it all melts in. Add a little bit more. So you'll see it start to change color, okay, and it thickens up. So you see it starting to thicken. And I'm going to add my last little bit here. All right. Added all my cheese. I'm just going to keep mixing that until it gets creamy. And it's all melted in there. Make sure I scrape the sides. Make sure I continue to scrape the bottom of the pan so that nothing burns to the bottom. If you don't scrape the bottom of the pan, this will burn onto the bottom, and it creates a disaster when it comes time to clean up. I have made that mistake before. So, speaking from experience. So again, I have my sharp cheddar and my smoked Gouda, and I've added my pepper jack, okay? You don't have to add the pepper jack, like I said. You can experiment with the different kinds of cheeses if you want. The cheddar, of course, is a staple for macaroni and cheese. Smoked Gouda is a really good cheese. It's really good flavor to it. And then the pepper jack, of course, is going to give it just a little bit of a bite to it. Okay? So I've added all that. This is also the time that you can salt and pepper your sauce for taste. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt. Okay, so just about the palm of my hand. Now, cheese does have some salt in it already, so you don't want to over salt your sauce, okay? Because you have the bacon and you have the cheese, which have a little bit of salt. Okay, so I'm going to add some salt, just a little bit, and some pepper. Just a little bit of that as well. And I'm going to add my bacon. So I have my bacon bits here, okay? My cheese has gotten creamy. You can see. Okay, see how it kind of runs off of there? That's the consistency you're looking for. It's got a nice creamy cheese. And actually hold that up for you so you can see it a little bit better. So you can kind of see here. All right, nice creamy cheese sauce. All right, I'm gonna add my bacon bits. And I'm just going to stir those into there as well. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of fold them in a way. So I'm going to kind of take from the bottom and you just kind of bring it up toward the top. And it's kind of like you're wrapping over top of your bacon bits. Okay. So I get those all mixed in there. All right, there we go. That's mixed in well. Okay, nice creamy sauce, bacon bits, a little bit of bacon grease, and our sauce is done. All right, so now we're going to move this over and we're going to mix it in with our noodles that we added to our baking dish. All right, so I'm over here. Okay, I'm going to kind of mix my noodles just a little bit, make sure that they're not sticking together. They shouldn't stick together. Very bad, okay, but I'm just going to kind of break them up real quick. So I'm going to do this, just to make sure that it's easy to mix them in. And then I'm going to take my cheese sauce, and I'm going to mix this in just a little bit at a time, okay? You don't want to go crazy with pouring it because you don't want it to overflow your dish. So I'm going to kind of spread this around. I'm going to pour about half of it. Okay, give it a little scrape so it doesn't drip off all over the place. Okay, and then I'm going to mix what I have poured in so far. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of flip the noodles around, get them well coated. Okay, once I have those mixed around and it's kind of seeped to the bottom so I know it's not going to overflow, I'm going to add the rest of my cheese sauce. Okay, I'm going to take my rubber spatula and I'm going to scrape out any remaining that's in my pot to make sure that I get all of that ooey gooey goodness out of there. Right, liquid gold, you could call it. Okay, so I got all my cheese sauce out. All right, I'm just going to mix all that in. Let it seep to the bottom, coat all of my noodles. Spread it around so that it's evenly distributed in there. Okay. And there we go. Get it all seeping down in there. Some people will just pour it on top and let it kind of seep down in as it cooks. I like to make sure that I've gotten all of my noodles covered with cheese. So I do like to mix it around a little bit so all of my cheese isn't concentrated in one area. Okay, once you have it mixed around pretty well, we're going to kind of smooth this off. Okay, so level that off, move it around a little bit. My rubber spatula. All right, now I'm going to take my panko breadcrumbs, about 1 cup of them, okay, which is about what I have left in here, okay. It doesn't have to be exact, and this can be preference. You know, if you want it crunchier, add more. If you want it less crunchy or you don't want to use them at all, then that is your preference, okay. But I'm going to take and I'm going to sprinkle my panko breadcrumbs kind of evenly across the top of my mac and cheese, making sure I get to the edges.
until I have it coated the way that I want. So it looks like it's not going to quite be all of the breadcrumbs that I had in there, okay? Like I said, it's kind of to preference. I estimate that to be about a cup, okay? But I generally don't measure a whole lot. Once you get used to cooking something, you kind of just go with your preference. And you can kind of tell. Now remember I talked about the bacon, so I'm going to kind of lay my bacon down in there just kind of as decoration. So I can lay that down in there. If you have any leftover cheese, okay, your sprinkled cheese, right, that's shredded up, if you happen to have any left over, like if you shred it up a little bit too much, you can certainly sprinkle that over the top. It'll kind of help fold it all together. Okay, but I have my mac and cheese now. I'm going to go ahead and add that to my oven. Preheated oven, preheat it to 380 degrees, I would say. And you're just going to kind of keep an eye on it. Once this gets golden brown at the top and you can see it bubbling up, okay, you'll know that it has finished. I would say it's probably going to take 20 minutes or so, somewhere in there. All right, so that is your mac and cheese. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pop that in the oven and enjoy. I hope that you like it.